Hey everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Video Games Ahoy podcast. My name is Jonathan Radford, and today I'm joined by Zach Hamilton.
Hello.
And friend of the podcast and recent Pokemon King, Callum Hurley.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Yay! Callum, you're back.
I am glad to be here.
Yeah,
Always a pleasure to have you on.
We were just saying that it's been like seven months since the last time you were on, which is
Yeah, it will have been.
It feels like we just did that episode.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, because for the longest time, I messaged you after the episode, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you gotta come back next week."
Yeah.
And then I look back, and it was 7 months later, and I was like, "Oh, maybe it's time we have him on." But it's honestly great to hear from you, man. I'm so glad what you said you come back on. It's really really great to see you. And
yeah, me too.
we will talk about Pokemon a little bit later on because you've done some really, really cool stuff over there on that there Pokemon. But mainly, we want to talk to you about VR because to me, I, as someone who doesn't really know a lot about VR, you are like the wizard of VR. And because it's really funny because I would go to Zach about VR things and then he would go to you.
Well, I was going to say, I'm really not the expert. The last time we did an episode, we had this whole thing where we had Callum list off the best to worst VR systems, and I without knowing that I had already picked the one that is considered the worst. But to be fair, since then I feel like I've had more time to jump into the VR thing.
Well, actually, I mean, should we just mention briefly about your VR in Resident Evil 7?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was we've mentioned on the podcast previously, but I don't know if you saw it, but
it's so silly. It's just the best part about it is just because I had the headset on and we were streaming it, I couldn't read the comments, so Jonny came on to to chat to people so that it wasn't boring.
Yeah.
But it's just there's just a super cut on YouTube now of me freaking out and Jonny having a hearty giggle. Trying not to giggle as well, which is even funnier. Trying desperately not to make to be mean, but also it was super funny.
It was, but yeah, and I think it actually can be something we talk about with VR as well. I mean, Zach, you played so many Resident Evil games in general. Playing Resident Evil 7 in VR just made it
I mean, I think it makes the game for me. I don't really want to play it without VR now.
But yeah,
agreed.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Maybe we'll actually Callum, before we actually get into it again. We'll stay on Resident Evil very quickly. Do you think 8 will have VR?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been really rumored. I was so sure of it, and then they haven't announced it yet, so I really don't know. I think what makes it so unsure right now, as weird as this will sound, is Hitman. Hitman 3 has VR support only on PS4. Not the PS5 version, even though PS5 supports PSVR as well. So there's that kind of weird thing of maybe it was planned for Resident Evil 8, but because they're not supporting it on PS5, it's not worth it. I don't know.
Do you think there's going to be a PSVR 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's just that. Maybe they're just waiting for that.
Yeah.
They don't want to push anything until they have a new product to sell.
Yeah, Sony's put too much money into R&D, and there are too many now registered, published patents for new VR technology from Sony's PlayStation department for it not. I mean, maybe they'll change their minds, but I think so much money's been poured into it. I'll be surprised if they're doing all that work just to not do anything with it.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because again we'll talk about it a bit later on because I've never bought anything to do with. I've never bought a VR headset. My brothers both have one, but it's a question that we'll talk about later with how do we persuade people? How does it become a thing where more and more people are buying it? But we'll get onto that a little bit later on. One of the things we should start off with, and I know you've mentioned it on the podcast before, is what you actually do as a day job, because you are actually involved with VR in a day-to-day, I guess, business as it were, but it in a really cool way as well. So to anyone that hasn't listened to the podcast before, do you want to just explain what it is you actually do?
Sure, and even for anyone who did listen to that episode, my actual job has changed a lot.
Oh, really?
In the last 7 months. So in terms of the company and what we do, I work for a company called Answer. In the last episode, I would have said Cornerstone. We've actually since been acquired.
Oh, wow.
So I work for a company called Answer, and what my team does is we create VR content that is used for child support, social services support, fostering, and adoption, primarily. And we're now expanding as well into education. And so, yeah, it's mostly to do with increasing empathy, helping people understand the kinds of trauma that kids in the social system have been through. And more recently, our education stuff is helping teachers better deal with those kind of situations, rather than just on the face of things, child is being naughty, shout at child, maybe think a little bit more about why are they misbehaving, what's going on with them, and just trying to, in some way, improve and reform how people think about children's situations. So it's pretty interesting. And my role in there is a lot of different things at the moment. I initially came in as mostly just tech support. I'm now working with the marketing department on videos. I'm now the lead person who runs demos when we're meeting with potential partners. Still doing the tech stuff. I'm in charge of testing for our new app. There's all sorts day to day. It's kind of crazy at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Every time you talk about what you do, it's always so cool because it's like this combination of like technology that, like I say, we don't totally appreciate or understand, combined with like a lot of new like ideas about how to help people, right? Like that seems like the baseline of and like when we talk about VR, if someone asks me ask me about the very limited knowledge I have, it's like, oh cool, it's kind of like you're in another world, and I shoot baddies, yay. But like I'm not able to like explain like the what that can mean for other businesses and stuff, like it's such a cool concept to me.
I mean, realistically, you can sort of use it for anything. Because I mean, don't get me wrong. Like what you said is a huge value of VR as well. Totally. Being able to place yourself anywhere in the world, in other worlds, and anything. But on top of that, it's also the ability to put you in someone else's shoes as well. Which, of course, is why it's so huge in entertainment as well. I mean, who doesn't want to, for 20 minutes, go to another world and be someone else and shoot aliens,
completely. Man, honestly, like it does sound. Well, this is actually a question I was going to ask you later, because it does seem like, it's obviously considering the last year in general, where things have become a lot more home based, and we are slightly more confined in many ways. It is interesting because, like, I imagine businesses are probably having to try and find new ways to I guess work around things. And I actually read something really crazy the other day, like IKEA, for instance, are doing, I think, is like VR for like their kitchen sets and stuff like that, which is dope. And it is interesting because and I think Zach has already kind of alluded to it as well. We always kind of assume that VR specifically means gaming, but like it's gonna start opening out. And again, as someone who doesn't have a massive knowledge of that, it's so interesting. Like that's why I love hearing you talk about it, because I can just see that like how far it's going to go is incredible.
I have a question on this actually, because Callum, I don't know if we spoke about this on the show, but I feel like at some point you and I chatted about how the VR thing is going to change, because of course not that long ago we were working in a bar together where there was a like a sort of a VR setup where people could go and play games and stuff, and we were chatting about whether or not it's something that's going to grow or dissipate, because on the one hand it could become something that's cheap enough that you can have at home. On the other hand, the novelty might wear off and people might not be so interested in that. But with that was before we were in a situation where people were stuck at home. How do you think that's going to affect the industry as a whole?
It already has massively. The increase in even just pure VR hardware sales over the last year have been absolute insanity.
Really?
And part of that was helped by the launch of the Quest 2 in September, just because it's ludicrously cheap for what it is.
Incredibly cheap for what it is.
Doesn't need a PC to power it or anything like that. And it just doesn't have any competition.
Which makes it all the more accessible, because if if for a lot of people, you sit there and you go, I want to get VR, but I don't want to buy like a high-end PC necessarily, because that's a big expense, like especially if that's all you want it for. I mean, if you're into your gaming and stuff, great, have a high-end PC. On the other hand, if you just want to have a go of some VR, it's not really the best.
Yeah, because it becomes like a gimmick as well, doesn't it? Like an expensive gimmick if you're just going to use it every now and then.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's got uses beyond that, but yeah.
Well, and you can't underestimate the value of wireless VR either. You know, even as someone who has a gaming PC who likes to play PC VR games, if a game is available on Quest Native to play it just on the headset as well, that will be the version I buy. Because it's so much easier to just, even though the graphics are going to be noticeably worse, the ability to just flick on the headset and start playing and not have to worry about setting up a computer, plugging in the cable and all that, makes a huge difference.
I can't remember when it was that it came out, but I'm assuming you played Half-Life Alyx?
I did, yeah.
Right, because I can't remember if we actually spoke to you about that on the podcast, but what were your experiences with that? Because that, I think, for many people could have been... I think that was one of the first games that's ever been nominated for Game of the Year? Or up there?
Yeah, it would have. It was, yeah.
It was.
I would say I think it probably is the first VR game to have been nominated. Obviously, a huge part of that is just the IP it's based on.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's an interesting one. So I played most of Half-Life Alyx. I actually still haven't finished it.
Right.
Interesting.
It's been nearly a year since I played it. I bought it at release. I played it solidly for a week or so. I played about 10 hours total. And just didn't get back to it because another game came out, then another game came out, and it's just one of those things where now a couple of times I've tried to go back to it, I've kind of forgotten where I'm at in the story. I need to start again and just play through it all. But it's incredibly well built. It's physics-based. They've come up with a lot of great solutions for things in VR, particularly the gravity gloves. It's a fantastic way of figuring out, okay, like it's annoying because movement in VR isn't so natural. Going over, finding things, picking them up is a simple thing to just teleport it towards you. It sounds like such a simple solution, but no one had really done it yet. At the same time, there are some things in that game that were clearly built in 2017.
Right.
Because VR is so rapidly moving, but games take a long time to make. The game was very clearly built with teleportation movement in mind, and every level is designed that way. But then by the time it came out, VR players were pretty comfortable with standard, as we call it, locomotion, just walking around like you would in a normal game.
Yeah.
So thankfully, they built that into the game. It works, but it was very clearly not made for it, and there are awkward sort of nooks and crannies that you can't quite get into without teleporting here and there. But for the most part, I think it was incredibly well built, high production value, and I mean to bring back a franchise that had been as dormant as Half-Life had been for that long was a great push for VR, because of course there are so many people who, of course, I mean, Half-Life 3 has been essentially a meme now for well over a decade. The idea that the next Half-Life game was VR, it genuinely did make a lot of people buy VR headsets. And a lot of the people who were turned off by VR were turned off by poorly made apps and games that either just weren't very good or, worse, made them feel ill. So to convince them to jump back in, and when they do, play a really high quality, really good game, was great for the industry.
I think that is so important, isn't it? Because
it gives a lot of trust, doesn't it?
Honestly,
makes people feel comfortable that yes, indeed, it can be done. Because I mean, like I say, it's such a new thing that there's got to be lots of people who are getting it wrong, I guess. I've been pretty lucky. I think mostly I've only played games that feel pretty good, but definitely if it's not built for it necessarily, then that can create a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Are there any so in your opinion, are there any upcoming games that you think not so much will jump on the Half-Life Alyx bandwagon as it were, but like sort of, because I imagine that it does feel like a change, like a turning point. Like Half-Life Alyx coming out and doing so well, as you said, a lot of it is to do with the name. But it does feel like things will be able to go, okay, well, we know that it can do well. We know that it can succeed if it's good. And there are people now, a lot of people would have been tempted, like you've already said, with VR because of that game. And Is there anything upcoming that like you would recommend, or anything you've played recently that you could recommend along those lines, or even just completely different but would still recommend?
It's a tough one, yeah. I mean, along those lines is kind of a tough one because as much as Half-Life did really well, it came out a year ago. And so getting anything out on that scale is going to be a few more years away. There aren't too many big AAA games we're aware of coming out, though two that I'm really curious to see how they turn out is Oculus have signed a deal with Ubisoft to publish an Assassin's Creed game and a Splinter Cell game.
Yeah,
I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
Wow,
so I'm very excited for those. I'm a huge Splinter Cell fan, so I'm really praying that they end up good. But you never know. You know, we had in December Medal of Honor. Oh, what was it called? That's really going to bother me. There was a new Medal of Honor game that came out, and it was developed by Respawn and published by Oculus Studio. So I was so excited for it. You know, when they first announced it, before we even knew it was Medal of Honor, we just knew Respawn were making an Oculus game. And so I was super excited because, I mean, Respawn know their way around an FPS. As much as I wasn't a huge fan of Titanfall 1, I thought the gameplay was excellent. Titanfall 2 was great. The gameplay felt fantastic. Same with Apex Legends and then Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Respawn know what they're doing. But they didn't quite manage to bring that magic over with Medal of Honor. It was middling at best.
Yeah.
You know, it really, if anything, made clearer how different Half-Life Alyx was.
Yeah.
Because when they first announced it, I was a little bit skeptical, purely on the sense of I was like, it's Half-Life, even if it's bad, everyone's going to say it was good. I was really pessimistic about it. But looking at everything that's come out since, it really is like they really did know what they were doing, and it helped that Valve also made their own hardware. And even before they made the Valve Index headset, they partnered with HTC to make the HTC Vive.
Yeah.
So they know VR through and through and have done for years. So I don't know that we're going to see anything quite on that level for at least a few more years.
Yeah.
We do know that Valve have 2 more big VR games in development. They said, I mean, God, it was 3-4 years ago now that they were making 3 big games, and Half-Life Alyx was the first one.
Half-Life 4 and 5. The next ones. Could you imagine?
Honestly, you never know at this point. I mean, what is nice is they have said that it sort of opened the floodgates, and they'd like to keep working on Half-Life. So
that's great to hear, actually.
And the reason they hadn't done well, so I don't know if you've seen it all. Jeff Keighley released a thing called it's like the making of Half-Life Alyx.
Yeah,
I can't remember the exact title of it, but he did it for all the Half-Life games. And this one's quite interactive, and you get a lot of behind the scenes of Half-Life Alyx, including other games they had started and cancelled, and there are a lot of them. And Portal VR is one of them.
Oh, really?
They did try making it, and apparently it was just incredibly sickening to play.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, that doesn't
at all,
surprise
actually.
me.
Yeah.
They couldn't figure it out, which is a shame because I think I'd be down for it regardless. But and yeah, Left 4 Dead VR as well. They really did try a lot of stuff.
Imagine Left 4 Dead.
I'm a big fan of the idea of multiplayer VR stuff. I mean, I don't know very much about it, but I know lots of people use like the VR chat thing where you go into like a virtual space with other people, and that's like okay, that's the Matrix. Just so you're all aware, that's the fucking Matrix. As far as I'm concerned, I don't need any closer. Well, okay. So, do you mind if I step back? Because I wanted to ask on the subject of Medal of Honor. Do you think it's a fundamentally flawed concept to do a first-person war shooter in VR, or do you think it was unpolished, or what do you think the biggest? Like, do you think it's fixable? Do you think there's a way that they could have spent more time and made it work? Or...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think it's an issue with the genre. If anything, I think FPS is actually currently one of the easiest things to do in VR.
Right.
The reason it felt so middling, weirdly enough, is because it was by Respawn and because it was Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
If it came out and we'd never heard of the developers and it wasn't an established IP, it would probably be considered a pretty decent indie game. But there were so many expectations for it. And where it let down was how it wasn't different from other VR FPSs.
Interesting.
So games that people already like to play, like Onward and Pavlov, which, Pavlov is a game made by a single person. And don't get me wrong, there are very obvious quality differences in regards to character models and animations and things like that. But in terms of fundamental figuring out how to do an FPS in VR gameplay stuff, it wasn't different enough. People were hoping for the Half-Life Alyx style revolution of it would suddenly click that this is how FPSs work in VR. And it was not very different from what we have already. And there were a few weird decisions made, and the way that their sort of social media department handled it wasn't ideal.
Right.
One of the biggest ones when it came out was how they handled snipers in VR. When you put it up to your face, your whole vision went into tunnel view and you just saw a circle, almost as if you were looking through like binoculars. And it was very flat, it was very 2D and whatever. And their response to people's criticism for that was the only way it could work in VR. People immediately pointed out many other VR first-person shooters that had a real scope. Like, you could see it magnified and you could close one eye. It was very realistic, proving that it could be done. And, they were saying, computers can't really handle it. And we're like, again, we've got games running on Quest doing this. So these weird excuses that just didn't track. And whatever the reason was behind those comments, we don't know. There's speculation maybe they're working on a Quest version and that stuff they were paring back to make it run on it. Who knows? But there were just a lot of things that came out, and it was like some of these are issues that have been solved in VR in the last couple of years. And again, it feels like one of those things, because games take 3+ years to make, and VR is evolving very, very quickly every 3 years. I think for a while, big games on this kind of magnitude are going to, in some areas of the game, feel a bit behind.
Yeah.
And they will be a product of when they were being made.
That is really interesting, because there's not really we don't really have any basis of comparison for this. I mean, you could argue like the jump to 3D maybe has some of that stuff, but I don't know. I don't think we really had. I mean, the other thing is we also have indie development, which we didn't really have at that stage. So there wasn't a platform for smaller developers to say, "All right, I know it's only 10 minutes, but here's a really good game." You know what I mean? There was no competitors for Super Mario 64. You know what I mean? It was Super Mario 64 or fucking Bubsy or Rayman. I don't know what I mean, it just really wasn't any there was no sense that it felt behind, because presumably, I mean, a game like Mario 64, for instance, came out in 96, but they were coming up with the technology in 92. So
it sometimes feels like there's a bit of a weird arms race going on in VR of everyone wants to be the one who came up with the big solution,
right?
And almost not willing to learn from each other because everyone wants to be the one to crack the code, and it's such a bizarre thing. I just think if a game comes out that plays really well and people are like, hey, this is the first, for instance, FPS that I've played in VR that I thought really worked. FPSs should, future developers working on VR FPSs should be able to learn from that. But instead, it's like every developer's trying to reinvent the wheel every time they make a game.
Right.
Every developer's under the impression that VR still hasn't been figured out, when actually a lot of things have been. But for instance, with big developers, they don't often look at indie games made by one person to see if there's anything they can learn from it.
Yeah.
And so instead, a company like Respawn, they were just taking what they know from making flat games and trying to figure it out themselves, rather than, at least this is just my own interpretation, it doesn't feel like they did enough research into existing VR games to try and learn from them.
Yeah, because I think ultimately that is the thing. Like, even from like my limited knowledge, you could kind of see that it's not the same thing, is it? Like, it is not the same thing making those. Like, there's so many different things that go into making just a normal game you'll play on a screen. Like, I remember Zach with reference Resident Evil 7. I remember straight away, like when you were playing it, you just like you still had the headset up. It was so.
I mean, it's not. Yeah, so that's not built from. I think I'm right in saying it's not built from the ground up with VR in mind. So there's a lot of like weird smash cuts of one scene to another, or like it opens up and you're just, as I said, like you're looking at a screen and you see your hands, and then all of a sudden you're in it, and it's Yeah, it's messy, but
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't want to play it without that because that's what's so fucky. Like that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
freaks
Yeah,
me
You
out.
don't,
absolutely.
but you do. It's
No, I do. I
It
definitely
adds
do.
to the eeriness, that
Yeah.
disembodiment, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, you can, yeah.
I would
It's,
still love to see you finish that game. By the way, I would probably chuckle
I
all
want
the
to.
way
I
through
think
it.
I
but
would. I think I would stream it. Except for I do feel bad that I said to my brother we would play it together because we played a lot of the Resident Evil games together when we were growing up, and it was quite a fun. And also, actually, the reason I initially asked him was because I was too scared.
Hey, no shame. I
shame.
played it
No,
with a
it-
friend as well.
Yeah,
I did
I'm
not play it on my
embarrassed.
own.
I'm not embarrassed.
It genuinely looked terrifying. Like I could laugh as much as I want, but I would have been terrified, just as scared.
I do find it gets less scary the further you get into the
I
game,
agree.
purely on the basis of you
Yeah.
start getting weapons and things like
Yeah.
that. You've got a little more security.
Completely, yeah. And also you kind of get used to stuff. You kind of know how it's gonna
Yeah.
play out. You get used to the beats and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
even there was like a part where we were playing, and I was like, I know exactly what's gonna fucking happen. I'm still gonna jump, but I know exactly what's gonna fucking happen.
I find I jump more when I know
Yeah,
what's going to
to be
happen,
fair, I
which
mean,
is
that's-
so bizarre.
Yeah.
That is really weird because it's like when if someone like holds a balloon and like has a pin and they're like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna pop it, but I'm not gonna tell you when.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the when, isn't it? It's the when you're waiting for.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Right. So just before we go
Yeah.
into the lot, because like we're going to talk about Pokemon soon. I just wanted to quickly ask you, so like again, I'm going to keep referencing myself because like for a lot of this, you're actually explaining so much to me as well. What do you think is like the next step for VR, for where we are now? Like from what I've seen Zach play of Resident Evil 7, from obviously what I've read about Half-Life Alyx and games like that, what is like the next step? What is going to be the big thing for VR, in your opinion, do you think?
God, that's a good question. Part of the difficulty right now is there's a lot of controversy in VR right now because the only real player at the moment is Oculus, which is not only owned by Facebook. They've been owned by Facebook for about 7 years, but only in the last year or so have they really started implementing them to the point where you require a Facebook account to use an Oculus Quest.
Yeah.
And if your Facebook account gets banned, your Quest becomes a brick. You lose your purchases. That stuff is a problem. That is a
Wow.
very
I did not
serious
know
problem.
that.
Yeah, I did not know that.
And there are people who they buy their Quest, they set up an account, and within 10 minutes, for whatever reason, Facebook system has flagged that this account that's just been created is probably a bot and banned it. And so someone's had this headset for 10 minutes and it's become a brick. And Oculus support can't do anything about it because Oculus support is not Facebook support. And Facebook support doesn't really get back to anyone. They don't restore accounts. And they don't give people reasons why accounts were banned either. So it's a really big problem that's not
I
really
didn't
being
know
solved
that.
right now. And they don't have any competitors. And even if they did have competitors, if you make something technologically on the same level as the Oculus Quest 2, it's going to be more expensive.
Yeah.
Facebook managed to price it down to basically what it costs to build because they're Facebook and they're going to make money off of you from having a Facebook account, which they
Yeah.
now require from you.
Exactly.
And that's why it's a requirement. We're going to make you have a Facebook account, and that's why it's £299.
Yeah.
The extra that you would have paid is now we've convinced you to open a Facebook account.
Yeah.
And you know, that kind of side of VR has been so much the focus and the talking point for the last few months that actually I've felt a bit out of the loop of the industry for the last couple of months because it's been
Right.
so negative.
Yeah.
What I think is really important and I really hope happens in the next couple of years is we start to see some really solid Quest competitors show up. Because even if they can get within £100 of the price range, I know a whole lot of people who would pay an extra £100 to
Just
not have to have a Facebook account and not
Yeah.
be tied
And not
into
run
that
that
ecosystem.
risk. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
and-
Apple, I saw Apple. I'm not saying Apple are the gods of anything. I'm not saying that at all. But I did see that they are releasing a headset. Is it next year?
They are.
Is it?
They are.
Yeah.
They are making both a VR headset and AR glasses. The AR glasses are quite a few years off, which is why they're making the VR headset. The worrying thing is the discussion happening on price right now.
Oh.
It's not looking like it's going to be under £1,000, which is
Yeah.
ludicrous. We'll see what happens when it comes out. I mean, one thing I will say for Apple, I'm not a huge Apple guy.
No, me neither.
I own an iPad, that's about it. However, what I will say is they do take privacy seriously. And if they were in this situation that Facebook is in, where people's headsets were being bricked because their accounts were being blocked for no reason, they'd do something about it. I do fully trust they would do something about it. So, and I think it'll get a lot of people interested. You know, as much as people joke about it and moan about it, there are people who will buy everything Apple makes. And,
they will.
And part of that is because Apple is not just a tech company; they're a fashion company.
Yes.
And they know that, or their designs are all of their products are beautiful. And they are very much fashion statements. And the same, I'm sure, will be true with their VR headset. And I don't doubt that there will be many people who, in their opinion will be that Apple changed VR because they made it cool, they made it stylish. And I'm actually looking forward to that happening. As much as there will be comments that will irk me every now and then when people will act like Apple invented VR.
But as you say, it's good. It's just good news to have a competitor. You know what I mean? Regardless of price, just good to be having that. It's not just Facebook ruling the.
Because at the moment, the reason they can get away with it is because there's no other option. If you want in VR, technically there are other options, but they're all PC-based headsets, so they immediately cost an extra $1,000 or something off the top, and they're wired and they're all these other things, and they don't even necessarily have the content. But the Oculus Quest 2, it runs on a fairly standard Qualcomm Snapdragon processor that's in phones. Everything in that headset you could build yourself. It runs on Android, an open source platform. Anyone could build a competitor. It's just hoping someone steps up to do it. So that's my hope for the next couple of years. And the only other one on a purely technological front is I hope they start widening the field of view. So it's less binocular, because we're at the point the resolution's amazing. The resolution in the Quest 2, which is just under 4K total, looks fantastic, but you still got proper tunnel vision. I really want some periphery.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, because I said earlier, I am really interested in eventually getting a VR headset, but that would be something that I think would wow a lot of people, because you're totally right. It does feel like when you play. I mean, I should just get VR for Nintendo Switch. I know that, but it'll be. But that's probably my level at the moment. But no, well, because obviously I knew that I was going to talk to you as well. I did do a lot of reading about VR in general, how it's done over the last year or so, and I know you've already said it, but some of the results they've had recently. I mean, it seems to have grown massively over the last year. I think I've got a quote here. So the global market size of AR and VR is forecast to hit 18.8 billion for last year, and that's 3 times the 6.1 billion market size registered as recently as 2016. That's within 4 years. It's 3 times the size. It's just going to keep growing, isn't it? I mean, that's what it feels like. Anyway.
And the thing is, I see all these numbers as well, and the thing is, at least from my own experience, they're absolutely true. I mean, as I say, even my own work, our business went crazy when the pandemic started. As awful as it sounds, no one wants to be claiming that in any way that they're, profiting or benefiting from something so awful. But yeah, it did change the market, because immediately people were looking for working at home solutions, and part of what we were offering and beginning to offer as we went into this was what we call our social VR room. And sort of in the vein of VR chat, you can become avatars and meet and chat. It's just much more closed down, and it's specifically will be tailored for each and every company. But that's the kind of thing suddenly people were looking for.
Well, I actually don't. I think it's, on the one hand, you don't want to feel like you're being, profiteering from a horrible thing. On the other hand, I do actually think that the change in people's perceptions of games and stuff. Now, I've my girlfriend is living with me at the moment, and she's never really been that into games, but and obviously not talking about VR so much, but she's starting to change her view on. I mean, she's playing a lot more games because there are fewer things to do. That's part of it, but it's changing her perceptions on the whole thing, and she. I don't think she'd appreciated quite how social it all is. And if you then bring in VR on top of that, that seems like the next logical step. It means that you can be kind of in 2 places at once. You know what I mean? That's...
Absolutely. And, honestly, as bizarre as it sounds, even when you've got really cartoony looking avatars, you feel so much more present with someone than you do even on a Zoom call when you're actually looking at their face. And it's interesting. On top of that, even just the environment when, like, particularly in my situation, I work from home. So the computer I'm sitting at now, I sit at this computer all day, every day. And then when I finish work, because I can't go out and do anything, I sit at this computer all evening.
Same.
And so these same four walls around me do get a bit tiring, nearly being a year into this.
Yeah.
And even virtual environments in VR, after playing a game for a while, or even just going into a social app and seeing some people, you do feel like you've been somewhere else. It's actually quite refreshing in a
I can imagine.
hopefully not too dystopian kind of way.
and something else as well. Like even beyond that, I do think as well. Like anyone that isn't able to visit home, or even if they're just able to go into an environment that reminds them of home, I imagine that is probably an emotional thing as well. Like I haven't been home to Wales in like 6 months, and a lot has happened in my family since then as well. And I've still not been able to go home to like sort of process a lot of what has gone on. So it's like it is interesting for a lot of people who haven't had the access to that it could have helped, and that's all we can ask for, really.
Well, it's really interesting. There's a video, I'll send it to you later on. I really recommend it. It's just a sort of 5-10 minute video. A group of people, I guess it was a few years ago, took some VR headsets into a care home and showed people important places in their life. So they asked people about particular places, if they could remember a place where something important happened, maybe somewhere you lived, somewhere you've been, whatever. Found that place in Google Earth VR, brought them there and put the headset on them.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's hard not to kind of tear up watching it. It's so sweet, particularly like one elderly woman looking around and saying that this is the place she met her husband and stuff, and getting really like teary bad, and you're like, oh man, honestly, like it is. It's not real, but it's so different from looking at a photo or a video or being on a video chat with someone. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, we've spoken a lot about VR. I genuinely do love hearing you talk about VR. It's so interesting for me, but also like informative as well.
Yeah, we always feel like we have to like gloss over it. Anytime VR comes up, we're always like, anyway.
We don't know what we're talking about. We'll talk to Callum. He'll tell us. He'll tell us what we need to know. I should also point out before we go onto the Pokemons, I've just noticed the Yoshi on your wall, and as soon as I noticed
that's cool.
I was like, I love it. I just wanted to reference that.
I made that with hammer beads when I was 12 or 13.
Oh, wow,
it's cool. It's really cool.
Great. I love that. That's great. All right, let's talk just briefly before we finish, because we've only got about 5 minutes left. I just want you to talk to your Pokemon home experience, because it was about like 6 months ago you decided to catch them all.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
So it was around August last year, and I was really feeling playing some Pokemon again, but I didn't know what game to play. I didn't know what to do. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, I've never actually caught them all. In any single game, I've never actually decided to do that and try and complete the Pokedex. And as Pokemon Home was now out, and the only games that you can't transfer into Pokemon Home are Gens 1 and 2 on the actual cartridges, but you can do on the Virtual Console versions on 3DS. And so I thought, well, now that I've got a place where I can actually just store all the Pokemon and keep them for the future, I can complete the Pokedex now. And then when any new game comes out, transfer them all in, and all I have to do is catch the new ones, and that can be a thing I do in future. So, and then for some reason, because I'm an idiot, I decided to make it harder for myself. I decided to do it generation by generation at a time, play through every single generation as well.
Whoa.
And get every form of every Pokemon individually. So for Gen 1, I did Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, because that was just significantly easier than playing through the Virtual Console and trying to catch them all there. So I did take the easy route with that one. I'm considering actually replacing them all. I'm considering doing red and blue, but we'll see.
Definitely don't need to do that.
Well, those versions, when you get them into Pokemon Home, they have a little Game Boy icon, so they came from the Game Boy games, and that's kind of cool.
That is kind of adorable,
And so I kind of want that. But
Yeah.
so for Gen 2, I played through Crystal first.
Nice.
And so all my Gen 2 Pokemon, most of them have the little Game Boy icon.
Cool.
Got to the end of that and realised there were still some Pokemon I couldn't get in Crystal, so I played through the entirety of Gold as well afterwards, very quickly.
What can't you get in Crystal that you can get in Gold?
I want to say the main one I had to do was Girafarig, but there were a couple of little ones here and there as well.
That's so weird.
That you couldn't find in the wild in Crystal. And also, part of the reason I had to do Gold was because I messed up. I knew you could get Ho-Oh and Lugia in Crystal, and I just kind of relied on that. I caught the 3 legendary dogs and then transferred them over to Pokemon Bank, and then realised to get Ho-Oh, you have to have the 3 dogs in your party.
No.
And I'd already transferred them out of the game for good.
No.
So I played through the entirety of Gold, basically to get Girafarig and Ho-Oh.
Oh, no.
And you had to catch the 3 dogs again.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that is a pain, dude.
so that was the thing. I'd say actually probably the longest I spent in Crystal was catching all 26 forms of Unknown.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, because they're just it's just RNG which ones you get, right?
Well, and it's kind of in stages. When you first get there, there's only 6 of them you can get. So I did them in those stages. Caught everyone I could, solved the next puzzle, which unlocked the next 10 forms, caught all the next 10, then did the next puzzle to try and get the best odds I could of finding the right one.
Yeah.
Obviously, the closer you get, when you're at the point where there's only one more form to get, but you could find all 26 of them, that's when it starts really taking time. But yeah, so I did Gen 2. What was useful about that is the Virtual Console version of Crystal, and the reason I chose Crystal is you could do the Celebi event, which was previously like a Japan exclusive thing.
Really?
Yeah, they unlocked it for the Virtual Console version, which was kind of
awesome.
cool.
That's pretty cool.
Gen 3, again, I took the easy route. I did Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire.
Sure.
Mostly because I could have played Ruby and Sapphire, but transferring them up would have been a nightmare.
Yeah.
I did that for one Pokemon, Jirachi, because the only legit way to get Jirachi in the UK back in the day was through a GameCube game called Pokemon Channel. And I have Pokemon Channel.
that.
I still have my save. It's a weird game about watching TV with Pikachu. But you know what? It's a lot of fun. And so legit, I did this on my tweet thread as well. If you see it at any point, I'll link you to it. Took pictures of it the whole way. Did the event. So I plugged my Game Boy with Pokemon Ruby into the GameCube.
Yeah.
That sent Jirachi from that into Pokemon Ruby. Sent it from there into Pokemon Pearl with a DS that has both slots. From Pearl, sent it over to Pokemon White. From Pokemon White into Pokemon Bank into Pokemon Home. So that I didn't want to do that with every single Gen 3 Pokemon.
Definitely didn't want to have to do
Because you
that.
can do it with... Because you do it like 6 Pokemon at a time is the max you can do at one time with that, which... Nah. So I did a Mega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and thankfully, again, the other harder Pokemon to get, Deoxys, is now just available in those games as part of the end of the story.
Nice.
Gen 4, I did fully legit. I did it in Platinum. So I did it in its original game. Spent ages transferring them all forward because they had to go through White into Pokemon Bank.
Yeah.
6 Pokemon at a time. And when you transfer between Gen 4 and 5, you have to play a mini game to transfer them. You have to do this weird thing where you got a slingshot and you got to catch your own Pokemon.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
And actually, for reference, you have to do that between Gen 3 and 4 as well. You don't have the mini game, but you do have to go into the Safari Zone and re-catch your Pokemon. And it's not a guaranteed catch. If you run out of Pokeballs, you get sent out and you have to go back in. It's just...
Yeah.
This is why we need the Gen 4 remake.
Honestly, there are some times when I'm like, why did Game Freak feel they had to gamify this part of the game?
Yeah.
I just want to bring my Pokemon
mad.
forward. I don't need a mini game that makes it unnecessarily difficult to do that. Oh god, yeah. But then Gen 5 in White 2. Weirdly enough, Gen 5, the most Pokemon in one gen, 156 Pokemon, easily the quickest I did.
Yeah.
Really?
Because in Pokemon White, before the end game, there are no previous gen Pokemon until the end game. So
Cool.
everything you run into is a new Pokemon.
Oh, nice.
And of course, during all this, I had Bulbapedia in front of me, which Pokemon are on which route and all of that sort of stuff. Gen 6 was really quick and easy. It's like 60 Pokemon. And they're all pretty attainable. Yeah.
Wow.
Gen 6 was tiny, but really good. Fantastic designs. Gen 7 was one of the most annoying by far. mostly because of the Ultra Beasts at the end, running through the Ultra Warp Ride, hoping to get the right Ultra Beast, only to, after many hours, find that some of them are exclusive to Ultra Moon.
Man.
Those ones I kind of cheated. I went to the Dynamax Adventures in Gen 8 and got those, because that was much quicker and easier.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
At that point, I was near the end, and I was like, I'm not going to do a whole other playthrough of another Pokemon game when I'm this close. Something I vaguely forgot to mention, because in Gen 3, Unknown got 2 more forms, ? And exclamation mark.
Oh.
So I couldn't get those in Crystal. The only place I was looking at it along the easiest place to get them was going to be Platinum, so I did them on the way. Now, to get them in Platinum, you have to have caught all 26 letters of Unknown. So I had to do it again in Platinum just to get the next 2. Had I bothered to do any research ahead, I would have been able to see that, and I would have just caught them in Platinum. But
but now you have them with the Game Boy symbol. So
I do. I do.
Mad props.
Which I'm thankful for now. And then Gen 8 was quite easy because I was actually mostly done. I had just happened to have, through my Shield playthrough, caught most of the Gen 8 Pokemon.
Great.
That's
We've
pretty
got
good,
the overworld as well, so you can see what you're
hugely
catching.
helpful.
Yeah.
The one thing that stood in my way, I did a whole playthrough of Sword because I hadn't yet to get Zacian, and I also bought a second copy of the DLC to get the Ghost Horse Legendary and stuff. I was nearly done, and I was basically done by October. I did this all in about 2 months. And I hit a wall where, because I decided to get every form of every Pokemon, that meant, for instance, when I got Deoxys, I had to get 4 Deoxys. 1 to keep in normal mode, 1 in attack, 1 in defense, 1 in speed. Anything that could be in a different form and stay in the box, I had to get 2 of. So then, when I discovered that the Pokemon Alcremie has 63 forms...
Does it really?
Yeah.
What generation is that?
This is Gen 8.
Right. I've seen I've only seen Alcremie in competitive, so I think I've only ever seen like 1 form.
Yeah, so
what?
They're so mildly different.
Yeah. Maybe I have seen them all and I just never noticed.
They're different flavors, and so they have slightly different colouring. And the worst thing is, only 45 of them are really catchable without an event going on. So the way you do it, the evolution is... The method is stupid. But you've got the Pokemon Milcery, and you get it to hold a sweet. And now, for reference, there are 7 different kinds of sweets, all of which will produce a different form of Alcremie. One is like a strawberry, one is a raspberry, one, all slightly different. You give it a berry, and then you, in the game, spin on the spot for a few seconds, stop, and then it will evolve. Now... Not only are there 7 different sweets, it will evolve in slightly different forms depending on how long you spin for, what direction you spin, and what time of day or night you are spinning.
Pokemon got super weird.
I know.
I haven't played Gen 8 yet.
There are 9 different things, and so I put it off for ages because obviously that sounds horrific.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
And
That's
so
a
I
whole
just put
day's
it off
work.
for the longest time, and then literally last week they did a Valentine's Day event. Repeating what they'd done last year, where 2 of these suites are event suites and you can't get them in the main game. So even if I had tried to do it a few months ago, I wouldn't have finished it. Milcery were appearing in raids, and when you got them, you got a bunch of suites. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to try and bang it out in a day. And so I spent all day doing Milcery raids, managed to get enough suites. And so then it was just about the evolving.
Yeah.
And literally, it's like I'm putting 6 Milcery in my party, giving them all one of each of the different suites. Okay, I'm spinning clockwise for 5 seconds during the day. They all evolve. Okay, now I'm spinning clockwise for 5 seconds during the day. Then 10 seconds back and forth. Then doing it at night. And then one of them was spinning for more than 10 seconds between 7 and 7:59. And I just thought, how ludicrously specific is that? But yeah, it got to about 1 a.m. and I was done. I've got all 63 Alcremie forms. And the only thing that was left to do was there is a Pokemon called Sinistea in Sword and Shield.
This is the one I saw.
Because, of course, it's based on Britain, so there has to be a Pokemon that is a cup of tea. And so, it's like...
and it evolves into a teapot for anyone
It does,
wondering.
yes. And so it's one of those things, they did the same with Flapple. It's like, it's not actually mug. It's a ghost that has possessed a mug, and you're like, okay.
It's a mug.
It's a mug. And it's made of special china. Now, in the game, Sinistea and Poltergeist have 2 different forms, with the most minute difference. One of them is authentic, and one of them is a fake.
Come on.
Because, when I'm buying my mugs, I make sure they're authentic china. And the only difference is, on the underside at the bottom of the mug or the teapot is a little blue circle that is like a authenticity sticker. You can't see that sticker unless you go into a battle with it and Gigantamax it. You can't get underneath it to see.
What?
Wow.
So you just have to keep catching Sinistea. Now, the small advantage to knowing if you've got the authentic one is they evolve with different items.
Okay.
If you use the cracked pot, that evolves the phony one, and the authentic one evolves with a chipped pot. So, I had a cracked pot in my bag. If a Sinistea can't evolve with it, I've got an authentic one.
It's legit, yeah.
So it's easy enough to check, but I still have to catch every Sinistea I find, and the authentic one is a 1% chance encounter. And thankfully I was about to say it didn't take me that long. It did take me a solid 3 hours, which for catching 2 Pokemon is actually quite a while. But yeah, I got there in the end, and then I had to add one final step of annoyance. At this point, it was about midnight, because at this point it was getting late, but I was like, I'm so nearly done. I've got to finish this tonight. I can't stop here. I had to get the chipped pot that I can evolve an authentic Sinistea, which you can only get from one guy at a market stall whose one item he sells changes every day.
Yeah.
So I set up the date change glitch so I could just change it on my Switch and check. And it's a good job I did that, because going through day by day by day, it wasn't the item he was selling until the 9th of June. Wow. If I hadn't done that glitch, even if I was checking the game every single day, I wouldn't be done until June.
That's mad.
Absolutely insane. I
must
realised
be
that was
so
a really
chuffed,
long way of telling the fact that I'm done.
But I was going to say, does this mean that you have every form of every Pokemon in Pokemon Home now?
Yep.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
I'm done. I've got my complete living form decks now.
Amazing.
Cool.
That is truly fantastic.
And when you're done, you're just kind of like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
I calculated it was just over 243 hours of gameplay.
That's
wow.
Unbelievable. But gents, we're gonna have to leave it there. Callum, thank you so much again, man. It's been such
Thanks for having
a
me back
pleasure
on.
talking to you about
Thanks for coming
VR
out.
and the Pokies and the Pokemon. That was actually really informative for me, because again, as with VR, I know almost nothing about Pokemon beyond Generation 1. But it is informative to know that I might have
Hang on,
to
did you say that you know Generation 1? I don't think you fucking do.
I know of them. I know some of their names.
I saw the anime once.
I know the Pikachu.
Is it Pikachu? I think it's Pikachu.
What kind of a Pikachu is that?
But yeah, we're gonna have to call an end to it, boys.
Good stuff.
But thank you so much again, Cam. It's genuinely a pleasure.
Thanks
again,
for having
Zach,
me on
for coming
anytime.
Keep an eye out for us on Saturday when the new pod is coming out, but hopefully we'll be able to chat to Callum again soon. Thanks again, gents. We're Video Games Ahoy, and we'll see you next week.
Ahoy!
Bye.
Ahoy!